Good afternoon, everybody. I'm delighted that so many people from all across the world could join us today for the Highland Threads digital exhibition launch, an exhibition that brings together 14 museums from across the Highlands to tell the stories of their 14 best costumes. For anyone that is not familiar with our organisation, Museums and Heritage Highland is a network organisation that works with museums and heritage organisations from across the region to support them to collaborate and innovate for a more sustainable future. I'm Nicola Henderson. I work as the Innovation and Network Manager for MHH, but also as the Heritage Specialist for Expo North. I'm delighted that we've been joined by all the museums who are taking part today, along with my colleague, Helen Avenell, who is the Projects and Partnerships Manager for MHH, Jim Dunn, who was the photographer extraordinaire that put together a lot of the beautiful content we'll see later. And I'm afraid I don't think Rachel, the conservator, has been able to join us today, but Rachel has played a crucial role in this project too. And I'm sure if there's any questions that come up around conservation, we'll be able to answer them across the session today. So when I was talking about MHH and what we do, I think the emphasis should be on the with. We very much work with our museums and with our organisations to help add a bit of extra capacity to help make ideas for new projects and new developments in the world of digital or collections happen by adding just that little bit of extra capacity. And we did that through our heritage cafes that we were new sessions that we set up to start with through the pandemic, a way to bring the museums from across the regions together to have a chat, to just maybe say, are you okay? How are you getting on? What are you thinking for the future? How could we support each other to pivot to doing more of our work digitally? What funding was out there? What did we need to reopen? But quite often just to have a bit of a natter and a cup of tea as well, which was so important in the current climate that we were all working in. And in that spirit, today's session is going to be quite informal. We're going to host it like it is one of our cafes. We're going to have a conversation around how the project developed, and we'd invite you to drop questions in the chat and the Q&A and be part of that conversation as well. The format's going to be that I will pass shortly to Dan, who is the chair of Museums and Heritage Highland and also the manager at Grantham Museum, to give a bit more background in the project and the collaborative process and how the project evolved over the months throughout the pandemic. And then we'll have a little bit of a conversation around that amongst us that, as I've said, I would like you to get involved in. We're also delighted to have Ewan Bashell from the National Lottery Heritage Fund today, who will say just a few words about the emergency fund that support the project to happen. We're very grateful to them for their support. And after he's done that, I will finally open up the exhibition to have a little look at the content. Now, taking a tour around a website online is a funny old thing. So what we're going to do is show you some of the jumping in points of how you can explore it in your own time, through the exhibition pages, through the maps, directly to the objects, however you want to explore it. But we will highlight 3 of the objects as well. So I'm delighted that Dr. Karen Buchanan from Gairloch Museum will tell a bit of the story of the Gairloch socks. Ian Leith from Wick Heritage Society will tell the story of the Fisherman's Guernsey, and we'll come back to Dan to hear a fascinating story about one of the beautiful Victorian wedding dresses that's in the collection. So just before I pass to Dan, I'd like to do a few of the thank yous. Thank you to Expo North for supporting today's event. We do have a series of In Conversation events coming up in May that I'll give some details of at the end, that they are helping support as well. And those conversation events will give us a chance to do a bit of a deeper dive into some of the costumes and history that the stories that we're telling. To High Life Highland, we'd like to say thank you as well. They support Museums and Heritage Highland to be able to put on the heritage cafes and provide a little bit of that extra capacity that can help give us the opportunity to develop these ideas. To the National Lottery Heritage Fund for funding the project, and to Colin Usher, who is in the audience today, who helped us create the website and get all the content online in such a beautiful fashion. So I'll stop warbling on now and I will pass over to Dan.
Thank you, Nicola. Yes, I have been given the task of an overview of the project, and well, starting at the beginning, it really grew out of the heritage cafes that we've been holding for not really that very long at that point, but we'd certainly been getting to know, I felt that I was getting to know my colleagues across the Highland sector so much better suddenly online at this stage where we were all isolated, and we're able to ask really pertinent questions, as Nicola said. about what we were doing and keeping up with each other. Around about that same time, I've been having conversations about costume with one of our directors at the museum. I'd said to her to go in and have a look at our costume collection, which is all sat in nice boxes from the previous project, where it was all actually put away very nicely, but hasn't really done very much for a long time. And she got very excited on looking at what was there, and led me to think, how can we use our collection of random costume from the ages? And I instantly brought up a lot of barriers to how that was difficult. It's really difficult to display costume environmentally. It would be a costly process because we don't have mannequins. How would we be able to do this? And also, a lot of our collection there's some beautiful objects, but they don't necessarily have stories attached to them. So within our collection, we've maybe got one or two absolute beauties, but that does not the exhibition make. So that just led me to think, I wonder what everyone else has in their collections in terms of costume. And then went to my new friends at MHH and asked the question, really, what have you got in your costume collection? Have you got anything? Is it all military? Are there any gems in there? And very quick, this was kind of at the tail end of a 2-hour cafe. We all got quite excited about what costumes we had and telling each other. And I think one of the great things that I found from doing this project is actually just finding out more of what is in each other's collections, because we're so involved and so busy in our own collections that sometimes our fairly near neighbours, we just don't have the opportunity to spend that much time on the kind of whole curatorial aspect of our jobs. So from there, really, the rest is history. I think I was lucky that for once I was able to come up with an idea and then didn't go, well, I'm going to have to shelf that. It's a great idea, but I'm going to have to shelf it because I would have to apply for funding, and I don't have the time to do that now, and I would have to do X, Y, and Z. But on putting it to a collective group, and also a collective group that then has got some paid for capacity within the organisation, after that meeting, Nicola and Helen and the board were like, okay, let's see what we can do, and having that bit of capacity to run with it and form an application to the Heritage Lottery Fund, it was taken off my hands. And it's a great thing for it. And I think it's meant that we have all then been able to spend the time on the nice aspects of really having an in-depth look at our one object from our collection. And that, I think, I'm sure everyone would agree, that in itself has created a web of activity around our objects. It's certainly as in Grandtown, where we've been able to spend the time looking at one particular story that we haven't really developed before. And I think it's definitely been a case of, I think it will be kind of almost on my gravestone of many a Mackle makes a mickle, that aspect that collectively we can all do a small aspect, because the workload hasn't been particularly hard for us individually, but it has meant that working as a team, I think we've come up with a really good product, helped by having some professionals in on the act. And that's another aspect, I suppose, that this project, what we wanted to build into it was making sure that each individual museum got something out of it that they really needed, that it wasn't a blanket approach of going, this is what you're getting out of this project, that Helen spent a lot of time then working with us all in finding out what would be the best way for us all to display or not. Are we open or are we not? How are we going to use the the assets, if you like, of having a photographer for a day, having access to Rachel Thomas, who's just bang on time arrived, having access to a conservator, because some of our objects needed conservation, others didn't. So it was really a joy actually to see everybody going, well, you have that, but you need it more, and I'll get this aspect of it. I think through constantly meeting, we met basically in that Heritage Cafe format, 2 or 3 times probably, just to move ideas forward and to discuss what was happening, and then progress like that. So I think everyone, well, I'm hoping that everyone would agree that the process was actually enjoyable and not at all heavy going. And I think, yeah, I think that's somebody else now what they thought. Morven, you had a very different object than everybody else. How did you find the process of collaborating?
It was really nice, as you say, to be able to not just work with everybody else during a difficult period, but actually keep in touch with colleagues throughout the sector. You know, we had a reason to all come together and share experiences and motivate each other. So yeah, it's been really good that way. What I will say is it's been nice to actually focus on curating an exhibition when to be honest, we probably wouldn't have focused on that because we've all been so busy trying to write risk assessments for COVID awareness and precautions, trying to keep people safe. I think a lot of our exhibition work probably would have been put on the back burner, so it's really nice to have had something to work towards and to have an end product as well. Yeah, we have our object that we chose for inclusion in the exhibition was a 1950s knitted swimming costume. So it was very different to a lot of the other costumes in the project. It wasn't as big, wasn't as grand, but we have always had difficulties displaying it and doing it justice when it's displayed in the museum, to be honest. We've always had to strategically pin it to cardboard backings to make it look presentable, but we were actually able to, we benefited from child-sized mannequins from the project, so now we can display the swimming costume a bit more aesthetically. You know, it looks better when it's displayed on the mannequin, and we're actually looking forward to displaying it in person in the museum when we open later in May.
Brilliant, thank you. And actually that made me realise that I was supposed to do a round of introductions before opening. Morven is from the Museum of Childhood, which is why she had a small swimming costume rather than a big dress as you'd expect. And actually, so let's do that. If my colleagues from museums can all say hello and just say where you're from, and then a couple of extra people who are from extraneous places. Starting with, on my left is Fiona Mackenzie.
Hi there, I'm Fiona Mackenzie and I'm the project manager with Strathaver Museum in Betty Hill, and we cover the story of North West Sutherland, and our object is the Balmoral Cap, which was owned by a prominent piper in the area, Willie MacDonald.
And Lynn?
Hello, hi, I'm Lynn Mahoney and I'm the curator at History Links Museum in Dornoch, and we cover Dornoch Parish, and our object is Catherine Gray's gown, which is a beautiful silk brocade gown that is on loan from Barbara Francis in Australia, and I know that she's watching, so hello Barbara, in Australia, and to Nikki as well in Switzerland. It's wonderful to have you here so that you can see your beautiful gown being displayed in this wonderful exhibition. So that's us.
Thanks, Lynn. Over to Neil.
Hi, I'm Neil Buchan. I'm chairman of Castletown Heritage Society, and we run Castle Hill Heritage Centre in Castletown on the very far north coast of Scotland. Our exhibit, our costume, is a late Victorian morning dress, something a little bit different, but it's quite an exquisite piece, and we were quite excited at the opportunity to have it professionally curated, displayed, and taking part in this virtual museum. It's been great fun.
Thank you. Ian.
Hi, Ian Leith, Chairman of the Wick Society with the Wick Heritage Museum and the Johnston Photographic Collection, and I better say Wick Voices as well. And our object will be the Fisherman's Gansey, which we'll talk a wee bit about later on, I believe. And it's just been a great experience for us. You know, like Neil in the far north, we sometimes feel isolated, but this has been a great opportunity for us to work with our colleagues in different museums.
Super. Katrina.
Hi, I'm Katrina. I'm coming to you from a very sunny Glencoe today. I'm the curator at Glencoe Folk Museum. The object that we put forward was our Spitalfield silk dress, which dates to the 1740s. And just like Ian and Neil said, we felt a little bit isolated where we are. We don't often get to kind of join in with all the other Highland museums at the meetings and such. So it's been really great for us to actually be able to do this remotely and actually join in with our colleagues again. So it's been great.
Lorna.
Hi there, I'm Lorna Cruikshank and I work for Highlife Highland, so I'm covering the two objects from Inverness Museum and Art Gallery and the Highland Folk Museum. So from Inverness we have a waistcoat which is said to have belonged to Bonnie Prince Charlie. We purchased it at auction back in 1929 and it is of a similar type to that worn at court in Italy, where he died in 1788. The other is the Drummond dress, which is early Victorian. That's the Highland Folk Museum in Newton Moor, and it was worn at the Drummond Castle ball with Queen Victoria and Prince Albert, and we reckon it's from around 1840s. So it's been wonderful for us. Just the Drummond dress in particular is in storage. We've an open air museum, so we don't get to have things on display. So to have the wonderful images taken of it has been fantastic. Thank you.
Who have we got left? Karen.
Hi, I'm curator at Gairloch Museum in West Ross, and we chose to include our famous Gairloch pattern kilts, stockings and waistcoat in the exhibition. I'm going to talk a little bit more about those later, and we're delighted to be involved in Highland Threads.
Thank you. Jason?
Oh, hello everybody. I'm Jason Ubich from Tyne District Museum and Clan Ross Centre. And I feel like we've cheated because we put a massive amount of stuff in. And I felt like it was Christmas this morning when I got a link to all these wonderful images of Major Forsyth's uniforms and all the accoutrements to go with it. So yeah, I feel like I've cheated a wee bit. Sorry.
No, you got what you needed out of it, which was really good. I think we were really, it was, yeah, really nice seeing a whole gamut of his military uniform. Vanessa.
Hi, I'm Vanessa Martin and I'm the curator at the West Highlands Museum in Fort William. We have a beetle wing dress in the exhibition, which we love. It was worn by a lady called Barbara Morrison in the 1860s, who was originally from Inverness, but she was out in British India.
Oh, sound's gone.
Sorry, it's a telephone come through. We were keen to have it involved in the exhibition because we were particularly keen for Rachel, the conservator, to have a look at. Sorry, I shall go back onto mute now. My phone stopped ringing.
Thank you, Vanessa. And Siobhan seems to have
I'm going to jump in for Siobhan.
Yeah.
So, so I should say hello. I'm Helen Avenell. I'm the colleague at Museums and Heritage Highland, but I'm going to introduce Siobhan because I know her her connection isn't great. So, Siobhan is coming in from Ullapool Museum, and their object that they picked was a yachtsman's jersey, part of a really interesting story about men from Lochside up in northwest Highlands who worked on racing yachts owned by some of the rich and wealthy of Victorian period and into the early 20th century. So Siobhan's here, so as I say, I'm just saying, introducing her on her behalf. So.
Great. And then we have photographer Jim Dunn. Would you like to say hello?
Hello, everyone. I'm the photographer responsible for a lot of the content on the website, and I've been a photographer in the museums and art world for a shockingly long time.
How was it, Jim, working with a load of Highlanders?
Very professional. I have to say the logistics of everything was the biggest issue that I had, but Helen Avenell arranged everything for me, so I more or less turned up on the day, met the curator or building manager or volunteers, and was given access to a space which I could use as a studio for the photography and for the video. So it went absolutely swimmingly. And Rachel, of course, had been there quite often a day or two before me and had set the mannequins up, or mannequin. So it was a relatively straightforward job for me, photography-wise. As long as I had enough space, I could set everything up, and yeah, it went really well.
And Rachel, you had the joy of working with all the costume.
Yeah, so I'm Rachel. I'm a trained conservator and based in Inverness. So I worked with most of the museums, not everyone, to mount their costumes. So mostly the dresses, which were a bit difficult given that quite a lot of them have had modifications over the years. Yeah, it's been a great experience. I really enjoyed it.
Dan, I was just going to say, we've got also, I know Jill isn't here in the panel, but Jill she's in the conversation. So Grome House is the other museum that was involved, and you'll see, like Morven, they were the other museum that put forward a child's costume, which is a beautiful hand-knitted jumper based on a pattern by George Bain. So Grome House is the other museum involved as well. So just to say there, Jill's here and listening.
Great, thank you. That's the lot of us then. And Ewan, hello. We'll speak to you in a wee while. Ewan is from the National Library Heritage Fund. So yeah, I pick up on what you said, Katrina, about being remote and how advantageous it's been to meet digitally compared to probably a lot of people who are used to meetings all the time. I think particularly, as you said, the outlying areas, it's really difficult to come into a central point because it's still blooming miles and miles and miles away. Tell us about that, how it's the kind of, yeah, I feel as if we've got to know each other better, even though we're all just little boxes on a screen, than we have done in well, forever really, in terms of where we used to meet maybe 2 or 3 times a year and chat over lunch kind of thing.
Yeah, definitely, I agree. I think before this, I'd made it to possibly one meeting, one Highland Museums meeting in 4 years, basically, just because, you know, it's about a 3-hour drive to Inverness, which is where all the meetings are usually held. So yeah, it's been, obviously, the pandemic has not been good for museums or businesses for a lot of reasons, but I think one of the good things that has come out of it is that people have realised that so much more can be done online and so much more can be done remotely, and it's more inclusive and more accessible in that way. So yeah, it has been good for us.
Anyone else want to chip in?
I'd just like to pick up on something you said about, when we used to meet in person. Of course, the Highlands is such a big place and it would wipe a day out of your schedule to just go to Inverness for an hour's meeting. But also when you're at a work type event, you maybe talk to one or two people informally over coffee. And I think this way we've got to see each other a lot of the time in our own homes. It's been more personal, even though it's been online. And you get to hear the whole conversation instead of just having a conversation with one or two people.
It's definitely. I think it's, for me, we've been able to kind of almost really work much more as a team. We've all got strengths and weaknesses. And we know certain things. We've got experiences collectively in all of our museums. We have different experiences, but an absolute wealth of knowledge. Some of us know far more about the learning aspect of museums. Some of us are more further down the line in our collections management, in our digital. That certainly this year, that's been a big eye opener how much I didn't know about digital. But there have been people within the network who have been fantastic at sharing knowledge. So yeah, I certainly feel, I don't know if anyone else feels as if they're more, it feels like more of a team now, and working on this project has certainly been that. It's kind of, it's not just networking, we've been doing something, which has made us connect more. Neil, how have you found it? You've kind of come in really just to the organisation just as we started Heritage Cafes.
Absolutely, we came in, I suppose, at the end of the party. It's been absolutely brilliant. I don't think over the years I've been doing this sort of thing, I've ever come across a more welcoming and socially interactive group. Certainly the fact that it's online, you're seeing each other all at the same time, it's very easy to ask questions. It's certainly been incredibly valuable to tap into skills and resources that we don't have within, for certain things within our own capability. So it's been a brilliant benefit. You mentioned digital. For us, we were just at the very edge of launching digital platforms, but seeing how others have done it and being able to tap in and ask questions, and so how did you do this or whatever, it's been amazing. And I really don't think all this would have happened if it had all been based around having to meet up somewhere centrally, like 2.5 hours south in Inverness. It's been great.
Thank you. Definitely. Yeah, well,
can I just say, I wasn't able to come to some of the cafes, but despite that, I still feel that there was a lot of support, and I just think that being able to see the costumes in other people's collections has been really enthusing. You know, it really makes you enthusiastic about your own collection again. Even though you've got wonderful things in your collection, you might not think to look at them all the time. But doing something like this makes you look at other things in your collection and in other people's collections. And it also kind of, I felt that it really reinforced relationships. You know, I've been able to speak to Morven and organise a loan from the Museum of Childhood for a different exhibition. So I think it's really kind of brought people together in a really collaborative way, in all sorts of ways.
Definitely. Thanks, Lynn. Nicola, can I come back to you?
Yeah. Thanks all. That was really interesting, and I think it was really useful to give a bit of background to how the project developed and how we got to this point, and also to hear from everybody, all the different objects that they have contributed. We're going to move on to having a wee look at the exhibition itself now, but first, if I could just come to Ewan from the National Lottery Heritage Fund to just say a few words, and then we'll have a good look at the exhibition. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicola. Hello everyone, thank you for having me along. I'll be very quick, I promise, because I think me included, everybody is really excited to get on and see more of the exhibition itself. But just to give a little bit of background as to how the project came about and to be supported by the National Lottery Heritage Fund. As you might know, we closed our funding last March as the effects of the pandemic became more apparent, and in response, slightly later in the year, we opened the Heritage Emergency Fund. This was a dedicated fund designed to provide organisations with the support they would need to survive and really just look after the heritage without the usual visitors or income that they would normally have. Really designed to cover core costs and mitigate any losses, as well as supporting sort of immediate recovery from the effects of the pandemic. The fund was also aimed at supporting organisations to adapt to the sudden change, which for some was really significant. And I think for many of the organisations involved in this project, I think that was really felt. So the fund was also geared towards supporting organisations to develop new ways of working, to form partnerships and to seek new and innovative ways to engage their audiences and interpret their heritage. So it was really exciting to see this quite unique partnership project proposed between all the organisations involved in Highland Threads. And now it's even more exciting to see that the project has come to fruition. I think the fantastic turnout today really shows the interest that the project like this has sparked. I think with the move to working online and working from home digitally, doing things differently, is something I think we've all had to grapple with, and this project really represents a great example of the potential for engaging audiences with collections like this remotely, and hopefully encouraging visitors when that's possible as well. So finally, I'd just like to say a huge well done to you all, to everybody involved. I think the results of your hard work and dedication absolutely speak for themselves, and I'm really looking forward to having a good look at it now.
Thanks very much, Ewan. So I'm going to have a go at sharing my screen now, and let's hope that that goes nice and smoothly. So hopefully everybody can see the homepage of the exhibition. If somebody can let me know with a wee wave that that's working nicely.
Yeah, it's working fine.
Thank you, Neil. So great. Ultimately, as we've said, Highland Threads is a digital exhibition. We are hoping, as our museums are allowed to reopen through May, that many of the costumes will be on physical display for you to go and see. But for everyone all across the world, whether you're able to travel or not, you are now able to dive into the exhibition at highlandthreads.co.uk. When you come to the main landing page of the homepage, there is a trailer video of all the costumes at the top. You can have a list of the museums, and we'll also be able to jump in by map, a list of events, and finding out a bit more about who we are. And also the important to remember that this is also about helping to support our museums at the time. So everywhere there's an opportunity for you to help to support them by a financial contribution, as if you were visiting an exhibition of this standard. So we'll take a quick look around the exhibition space, where you'll be able to get a good look at all the costumes that are on display. And you can click in from each one to have a look around the content, around the movies that Jim has created for us, along with the detailed shots and some archival imagery as well, and some audio. So there's a beautiful way to go through each and every costume that we've spoken very briefly about there, and you can dive in that way. But I'm going to take us on a tour around the map today, so you can get a feel for the area that we're covering and all the museums that are supported through this project. So you can go into the map. And so we'll take a start with Gairloch Museum, and we will visit the Gairloch pattern socks. Now I'm going to put the video on. I'm just warning some people that video can be a bit stuttery on Zoom. When you watch it yourself, it flows really beautifully and it will work extremely well in your own browser, but we will have a little look just now to give everybody a feel for the videos. I'm going to need to move all of you guys over here. I'm not sure if everybody could hear, there is music with them as well. I'm not sure if the music was working. It was, oh, that's good. Great, so if I can invite Karen to maybe talk a little bit while I go through some of the gallery images to say a little, tell the story of the Gairloch pattern socks.
Thanks, Nicola. I hope everyone agrees that Jim's done an absolutely fantastic job with the photography. It's just beautiful to see the knitting up close like that, and the beautiful, neat knitting, the colour work, stranded colour work pattern in the design of the stockings. I see somebody's asking in the questions and answer section about why we chose the objects. Back in the day when we were able to meet in person, I was famous for turning out to meetings with my knitting and knitting feverishly through them. So it perhaps wasn't a great surprise to everyone that I picked some of the knitted items from our collection. And like the Highland Museum of Childhood, we didn't choose the grandest of our objects. We chose, I think, one that had a good provenance, an interesting provenance, and also a good backstory. So here we have the story not just of these socks as an object themselves, but also the story of the Gairloch pattern in which they are knitted. And I'll tell you a little bit of both of those stories, which you can obviously then explore in more depth through the Highland Threads website. The socks themselves are nearly 50 years old, and you'll notice on the heel there that they look as if they've never been worn. And indeed, that's very near the truth. They were knitted by a lady called Becca Macaulay, who lived in Oppenham in the Gairloch area. She was actually schoolmistress in one of the local schools, and she was a great knitter. She knitted for her friends, for her family. We actually have a sock knitting machine in the museum as well, which came from Becca. And I'm told that when she first donated it to the museum, she used to ask for it back just before Christmas so she could run up some socks as presents for people. So Becca knitted this particular pair for her nephew, Hector. And Hector felt that they were just a bit too bright and gaudy to go with his kilt. So very ungratefully, I might say, he went back to her and asked for another pair, and she obliged and knitted him another pair in a sort of dark green and navy. So this pair that we've chosen to photograph, precisely because it is so beautiful and colourful, was unfortunately rejected for wear by its owner for the same reason. But happily, it's now in our collection. And you'll see the pattern, the Gerlach pattern on the socks. It's this wonderful double diamond or dice pattern, it's normally called. So it's knitted in stranded colorwork technique, the same technique that's used for fair isle knitting, but only using 2 colors. But any 2 colors, so long as they contrast well enough with each other, could be used. And the pattern has its origins as far back as the 1830s, when the women of Gerlach, during the destitution years, so the period following the Great Highland Famine in the mid-1800s, started spinning and knitting stockings to sell to visitors to the area, but also further afield to bring an income in for the family. So while the men were earning their £1.50 of meal, building the destitution roads, the women were knitting stockings. And Lady Mackenzie of Gerlach, who was a trustee of the estate at the time for her stepson, Lady Mackenzie was the mother of Osgood Mackenzie, who established Inverview Garden, which some of you may know. She very much fostered this home industry. And she brought in people, ladies from Skye, to train the Gerlach women in spinning techniques and in knitting techniques, and trained them up until it reached the stage where the Gerlach stockings were being sold further afield, bringing in, we're told, an income of around £500, a lot of money at the time, to the area per year, but also winning lots of prizes at the Highland home industry competitions because of the quality, not only of the wool that was spun, but also the beautiful dyes that they were achieving from the natural colors as well. So the pattern, the double diamond pattern, was the most popular, and it has endured. And we're very proud of all the items that we have in that pattern in our collection, and it extends beyond socks to things like waistcoats as well. And in fact, we've created a new headband pattern especially for this exhibition, which is now for sale on Ravelry. So it's very much a part of our living heritage. The pattern is still being used. We're still knitting these stockings, and we're still using the pattern in other ways, and we're really delighted to be able to share it with a wider audience through this exhibition.
Thanks very much, Karen. So you can spend a lot of time on the page reading more about the story that Karen just told us, as well as looking through a gallery of other images. And you can also, if you scroll down to the bottom, you can look to purchase the pattern to knit your own socks, and that also links through to the slightly simpler pattern of being able to do the headband that Karen just spoke about as well. And we'd also encourage you to donate and support Gerlach Museum at this time as well. So our next object we're going to take a look at, and go back to the map. So we'll move all the way from there to over here up to Wick and have a look at the Fisherman's Guernsey. So I'll show a little clip of the video again. Okay, thank you. Ian, would you like to tell us a bit of the story of the Fisherman's Guernsey?
Certainly, yes, thank you. Guernseys are, of course, warm, woolly jumpers, and they were worn traditionally by fishermen. And here in Wick and Caithness in general, the fishing industry, and particularly the herring fishing industry, was a major factor in the growth and development of the area in the 19th century. At a comparable time the fishing industry was developing, there was also the beginnings in Wick of a rather innovative photographic business in the town. And Alexander Johnston began a photographic business in Wick in the 1860s. And this business ran for over 100 years through 3 generations of the family. And the Johnstons have photographically recorded nearly all aspects of the herring fishing industry, including some very detailed photographs of fishermen wearing Guernseys. And of course, you can look at all of the Johnston photographs on their website at johnstoncollection.net. But Guernseys were not, of course, unique to Wick per se. They did, however, tend to have a sort of traditional regional association. And we were lucky that through a very detailed study of some of these Johnston pictures by one of our volunteers, Margaret Reid, it began to emerge that the patterns of the Caithness Guernseys were quite unique to this particular area. And fortunately for us, the husband of Margaret, Gordon Reid, there he is, he, in his own words, Gordon says that he's a minor celebrity in the world of Guernseys. But what he does is he knits Guernseys, and he was able, through looking at the reference in these photographs, to actually pick out the patterns, and he has been able to recreate these unique Caithness designs of the Guernseys. In the Wick Heritage Museum, we have always had original Guernseys on display, but now, in fact, we've also got some of Gordon's recreated designed Guernseys as well within the museum. And that's been a really useful addition and kindly donated by Gordon. And again, using the photographs from the Johnston collection and looking at more closely at the Guernseys, and Gordon has recreated them, but he's also now beginning to give them names as well. Where we know who the person was in the Johnston photograph, then that Guernsey, for example, there's one now called the Fergus Ferguson Guernsey, because that's who the picture is of wearing the Guernsey. Guernseys had 2 purposes, really. Most importantly, they were effective working gear. They were hard wearing, traditionally knitted as a single piece. I'm no knitter, so I don't know about these things, but if you read the website, you'll be able to find out more about how it was actually done. But apparently, Guernsey 5-ply wool is the important element of that. Those of you that know about knitting will be able to appreciate that. But it does apparently allow them to be knitted up very tightly, so therefore they're warm. And I think it's called watertight. I don't think they're actually waterproof, but they do prevent some water getting in. The other use that fishermen had for their Guernseys was they had their working Guernsey, but they also had their Sunday best Guernsey. So when a man needed to go out about town, he had his Sunday Guernsey to wear as well. There's a legend, and I think it really is just a legend or a theory, that some of the patterns may have been related to particular families or particular communities. And what's claimed is that should a fisherman fall overboard and be lost, that he could be identified from his Guernsey as a particular family member or a particular community. But I think people in the Guernsey world kind of dispute that theory, then it's maybe a little bit extremely debatable. So there's the Fisherman's Guernsey from the Wick Heritage Museum.
Thank you very much, Ian. And as before, you can spend time on the page to have a look at the videos, the detailed shots, the gallery images that come from the Johnston collection, read the story or listen to it as well in audio, and right down the bottom, you can even look to purchase images from the Johnston collection. or look to just support Wick Heritage Museum in other ways. So we're going to go now to the Victorian wedding dress. And that takes you to a completely different part of the Highlands again. So we'll head all the way down from Wick to Granton. Oh, I've gone too far. Oops. Yeah. And here we have a beautiful late Victorian wedding dress that's housed at Granton Museum. So I will show a little bit of the video once more. Okay, Dan, would you like to tell the story of this beautiful dress?
Absolutely, mute off. Yes, as you can see, this is really no ordinary country wedding dress. This is a silk satin dress, which is from a very special high society in Grantown wedding. This is from the wedding of Agnes Gordon, and she marries in 1882 Donald McDougall. Donald McDougall is a merchant. He's been a merchant for 30 years. He's 52 and Agnes is 22 at the time that they got married. He's a very successful merchant. He owns the biggest shop in the most prominent position in Grantown, in the square, the shop that's now our co-op. And he owns it. Really, this is a kind of symbol of a success story. Dougal owns this big shop in Grantown, which is at the time when Grantown is really hitting its boom time in tourism. Grantown is growing up exponentially. Big hotels are developing at this point, and there's a huge amount of well-to-do people coming and visiting in the summertime. Probably because of two main reasons. The 2 decades before this marriage, the trains came to Grantown. Thankfully, the clever laird, the Earl of Seafield, negotiated for both upcoming train lines, which were planned to come up to the north, Aberdeen to Inverness and Perth to Inverness. He negotiated for both train lines to come through Grantown to connect, where they easily could not have done. He paid quite a bit of money for that to happen as well. And then also around that same time, Queen Victoria had a very public visit, even though she was incognito, to Grantown to stay in our hotel. It was the first time she'd stayed in a hotel. She came on horseback through Glenfeshie from Balmoral with her husband and stayed in the guise of a lady. Once she got through the mountain passes, came in a coach and pretended to just be a simple country woman. But the tabloids got a hold of this shortly afterwards, and it was a very extremely well publicised event, probably akin to Meghan and Harry going off to America. I think it really caught the imaginations and left Grantown on the map as the place to visit. And with the coming of the train, that made it a very easy thing to do. So Grantown at this time is around about the second biggest town in the Highlands, and it's got a huge number of summer visitors. So McDougall is doing very well for himself. He can afford to build a large house just on the outskirts of Grantown, and young Agnes is moderately well off, comes from a good family. In her maternal grandmother, where she's born, lives in Poolew, and her father is a Grantown man. So it's a very good match for her. The shop, happily, is a draper's, as well as a grocer's, as well as an ironmonger's, as well as a furniture maker's. It's kind of the department store of the time. But a lot of the shops at that time sold everything. You see quite a few merchants in Grantown High Street that are making, have furniture crafts, people making furniture to sell. They're really making the best of this time. So it's little wonder then that Agnes has such a beautiful dress. We can only imagine that her wedding was a pretty fine affair. Later in life, Donald dies in 1914 and leaves Agnes with her 8 children to go through the war. 5 of the 5 boys all go to war and all come back. 3 of them have come from signed on from around the world, so they were already out in the world. And Agnes continues as the leading merchant in Grantown-on-Spey until the 1940s. So she becomes a very wealthy, prominent business person in the Grantown community from there on in. And there ends the lesson.
Thank you very much, Dan. And as with the other pages, you can spend time having a look at the galleries, reading more information. There will be a podcast and a story about the costume that will appear over the course of the next few weeks. So there's always good reason to come back because there will be some new content added. You can also go shopping with Grantown Museum from wherever you are, or donate to support them while they are closed at the moment. So I'll take us back to the exhibition page. I don't know, can others see the Q&A while, I can't quite see it while I've got the page open. I thought it might be nice to leave the objects up. Helen, if you could see the Q&A and see if there's any questions.
Yeah, so I think there's a couple of kind of quite straightforward questions. Yes, the bodice of the Grantown Museum wedding dress is boned. Dan, I believe it is boned. And as you'll have noticed, a tiny, teeny tiny waist. I think it's 23 inches. Is that right, Dan?
Yes, indeed, it is boned, and yeah, 23 inches. We for mounting it, we had to cut a normal mannequin down with a knife, and it just did not seem real to keep going and going and going down to that level. It is tiny.
Couple of the questions are around why we chose costume and selecting costume around the provenance, knowing the provenance or not knowing. I think we chose costume really because it was Dan's musings about having costume in collections across the Highlands. For some of us, never being able to put it on display, and the issues I think particularly around display are quite key. One part of the project was to fund mannequins. So, for example, the Glencoe dress. We haven't got the before picture up on the website, but we have seen it. Katrina, you know what the dress looked like before having been remounted. I don't know if you just wanted to mention what it looked like before.
Yeah, definitely. I can kind of answer one of the other questions as well, I think from Lauren, who asked how we chose objects if they didn't have any provenance. And for us, I mean, it was kind of a no-brainer for us to choose this dress, partly because it's our most beautiful item of costume that we have, and also because the way it was displayed before, we really needed kind of external professional assistance to get it remounted on a proper mannequin. The one it was on before was just completely the wrong shape. It was far too tall for the dress. It was far too skinny for the dress. It didn't have the right hips. You can see it in the screen there. And if you actually go onto our page on the website, you can see that we did have to be quite creative to get those hips as well, because the new mannequin that we got didn't quite have that shape either. So yeah, this has been great for us to get the help of Rachel, the conservator, to come down and help us with that, because although we knew it was on the wrong mannequin and was the wrong shape, it was very delicate and very fragile, and we didn't want to handle it too much without the help of a conservator there. So having Rachel to help us do that was one great part of the exhibition for us. The other part about having no provenance. So this is one of the items that we don't know a huge amount about in our collection. We know who donated it at the last moment, but we don't know the full history of the dress. And we've been so lucky to have been put in touch with Rebecca Olds, who is not on the panel, but I know she's in the audience. So hi, Rebecca, and thank you for all your help. Rebecca is a dress historian, specialising particularly in 18th century dress, and she was basically able to look at our gown and tell us so much about it that we'd never have known ourselves, even with research. You know, she could look at a style and say that was done in the 1760s, this part was added in the 19th century, things like that. So although we don't have the history of the people of the dress, we've learned so much more about the history of the material, and through that we've been able to say that it's been passed down the same family and altered at various times for different shapes and different sizes. And we do hope to find out more about the people as well. So yeah, that's been fantastic for us.
I think one other question that maybe a couple of people might want to comment on is just a question around, did you find the virtual format forced upon you to be in fact freeing in some ways, as in many ways more information can be layered than in a traditional in-person display? Nicola, I don't know if you want to mention some of that thinking that we did around the fact of it being virtual and thinking about how best to deliver the project visually and virtually.
I think when Dan first floated the idea and started mentioning about his costume and storage that hadn't been out and wanting to be able to tell its story, and the context that we were doing it within, of living through a pandemic, it just seemed natural to me to look at that it had to be online. And actually, the more that I've learned about costume as we go along, I think it actually works so well for the format. A lot of these costumes would have to be so protected, would be vulnerable to the environment, that perhaps we wouldn't get as close to them as we can by using photography, by getting right in with the detail and getting really up close to the outfit. So I think it actually shows them off really, really well as helping us to reach new audiences. As we know, we've got a global audience here today, and hopefully a lot more people will stumble across the website as we launch the exhibition today and look to reach out. So we'll be able to tell our stories to more people from all over the world. But also I think it really, being able to do it online just allowed us to be able to show off the costumes in a whole new way, for people to really look at parts of it that you wouldn't see, that bit behind that you can't quite get there to, or really when we were looking at the Glencoe dress there and you could see the beautiful stitching right up close. That being able to do that through photography and being able to show it off online, I think has been a real benefit to the project.
There's one question just about are there any other child costumes from earlier periods, and are there plans to exhibit them in the near future? I think this maybe just ties into our wider thoughts and maybe thinking towards the future in terms of Highland Museums and having worked collaboratively on this project, where we might go next. I think there's lots of enthusiasm maybe it's around costume, maybe it will be around other parts of collections where we have overlaps. I think from my perspective, it's just been amazing working with 14 museums and also so collaboratively and so positively. So I know that I think there's lots of other ideas in the pipeline, and this shows just how well we can all come together and work to create something as Dan sort of said, and bigger than the sum of its parts. So yes, I guess watch this space. We'd like to do more, I think.
Absolutely. I think we're in conversations looking at augmented fashion, looking at other museums with costumes that would have liked to have got involved, but through either COVID restrictions or timings, we haven't been able to do that. So that certainly, I think, has legs to grow after this. Yeah, so it's watch this space.
Yeah, and I think if I could just add, for individual museums as well, it's having that focus on one object is actually then also led to a lot of other things that are kind of springboarded, even just if it is just finding out. I'm fascinated to find out more of the McDougall story now, and we probably will, look much more in depth at that family and around the dresses kind of inspired our thinking on gallery refresh, and just in terms of engagement with our community and with people around us. I think it's been absolutely fantastic.
Great. Well, thank you, everybody. Is there any more questions?
Can I just add that one of the questions was about whether any photographs were taken of the inside of the garments. Well, certainly when Rachel was mounting Catherine Gray's gown, which is from about 1710, but the colours are still absolutely incredibly vibrant. But she took loads of photographs of the inside of the way that the dress had been put together initially, the way it had been altered. So there are lots and lots of photographs of that. And the other wonderful thing was that she was able to have Rebecca, who also worked with Glen Coe. Rebecca Olds was on Zoom so that she could, or WhatsApp I think it was, so that she could have a look at the way the dress was constructed as well. And she was able to tell us lots about the dress. So, it was just a wonderful way to do that. And that the photographs of the inside of the dress are just as interesting as the outside.
I'm just noticing somebody did ask a question about buttons, so it's not something I can answer. It's a question around whether Scotland had a button making industry. I think that's come from looking at the Grantown dress with the beautiful buttons on the dress. I don't know, Dan, do you know anything about the buttons? It might be something that you're going to go and look into now.
Yes, I know that we had in Grantown, we had quite a lot of linen manufactories from the mid-1700s to the 1800s, but they weren't particularly successful. I don't know anything about buttons, however. They are beautiful buttons, though.
Great. Well, if that's all the questions, I'll just quickly say that there are more events coming up as well. Next week, on the 8th of April, Helen and I will be taking part in the last Heritage as a Creative Future Expo North event, talking about this project and how our heritage can be an inspiration for contemporary design. We will also have Esther Rutter in conversation with Dr. Karen Buchanan, where they'll be looking at knitting patterns, especially around the Ganseys and the Gerlach socks. Grome House have an event about translating Pictish key patterns, which we'll be looking as well at the George Bain jumper that we have on show. And if you were interested and inspired by the beautiful Glen Coe dress and the silk brocade dress from History Links that we saw briefly there, then Rebecca Olds will be in conversation with Katrina and Lynn, looking in detail at those two dresses and their stories. And last but absolutely not least, we'll be looking at the beetle wing dress, which is also a stunning dress, with having a lot of people in conversation to discuss Barbara Morrison's history and the dress that she wore there. So please do Say the links haven't gone live for those events yet, but they will be added in time. And also please do remember that the last year has been extremely difficult for a lot of our museums. Some have been closed since the end of 2019 and will be opening for the first time into May. Others did manage to open for a short period, but obviously with greatly reduced numbers, and a lot of our independent museums across the Highlands do rely on their visitor income and support at this time. So if you do enjoy visiting the exhibition and the objects, then please do consider donating and supporting the museums. At the Pay It Forward page, you can make a donation and that will be shared out through all the museums that have taken part in the project today. So I think if nobody has anything else to add, I'll just say thank you once again to the National Lottery Heritage Fund for supporting the project, to all the museums for taking part, for sharing their wonderful costumes with us, and for being part of such a positive collaborative project, and to Expo North for helping us host today's event. I'll stop sharing as well. Oh, and yeah, I should remind everybody that of course you can go and visit the website yourself now at www.highlandthreads.co.uk. So please do and send us feedback on what you think, and join us if you are interested in any of the costumes, then join us for some of the events to do a bit more of a deep dive into those as well. Thank you.